British tourists finally understand why Americans fly the flag everywhere. In 2026, a Gallup survey found that 43% of Americans say they display the American flag outside their homes on holidays or other days during the year. And this is the funny part. British tourists don't need a survey to discover it. They just need to look out the window. Because in America, the British joke goes something like this. How many American flags can you spot? 5 minutes later, the answer is yes. And for British visitors arriving in America, the first question isn't where are we? It's why is there another American flag? Then another and another. And suddenly there's a giant one flying over a highway that looks big enough to have its own weather system. One British visitor joked that America doesn't simply do flags. No one does this better than America. And honestly, once you've seen some of these giant American flags, it's hard to argue with the spectacle. But here's where the story gets interesting. At first, British tourists often see the American flag as decoration. They see it outside houses, on trucks, at restaurants, at malls, at libraries, at sporting events, on clothing, even on cowboy hats. One British visitor described walking through an American neighborhood and counting the flags. He expected about 20. He ended up counting 28, and his reaction was basically, wow. Because in Britain, national flags aren't typically part of everyday residential life in the same way. So when British visitors see an American neighborhood where house after house has a flag outside, it creates a genuine culture shock. But then comes the bigger question, why? Why do Americans display the flag so openly? Why does it appear everywhere? And what does it actually mean to the people flying it? The answer becomes more complicated in 2026 because America is celebrating its 250th anniversary. And new research gives us a fascinating picture. Navigator research found that 81% of Americans agree that seeing the American flag makes them feel proud. That's an enormous number. Even among younger Americans, the majority still expressed pride when seeing the flag. 64% of Gen Z respondents and 75% of millennials. Among Gen X, it rose to 85%, and among baby boomers, 91%. So maybe the British tourists were asking the wrong question. Maybe Americans aren't simply obsessed with a piece of fabric. Maybe they're seeing something else. Ronald Reagan once described American patriotism as the call to freedom everywhere for all peoples. And he also argued that the American flag represented more than a national symbol. And that's where the British visitors begin to understand. For many Americans, the flag can represent freedom, family, community, military service, sacrifice, history, and simply belonging to the country they call home. Pew Research found that 22% of Americans specifically name freedom as a source of pride in their country, making freedom the single most commonly mentioned source of American national pride among the countries surveyed. And another 2026 survey found that 36% of Americans said freedom or liberty best defines what it means to be American, while 14% chose patriotism or national pride. That's an important distinction. The flag may look patriotic from the outside, but for the person standing underneath it, it may represent something much more personal. A grandfather who served, a family that built a life here, a child growing up believing they have opportunities, a community celebrating together, or simply the feeling of saying, "This is home." Of course, America isn't a country where everyone feels exactly the same way. Gallup's June 2026 survey found that 53% of Americans were extremely or very proud to be American, while 33% were extremely proud. Gallup noted that the 33% figure was the lowest extremely proud reading in its trend going back to 2001. So the flag doesn't erase disagreement. It doesn't mean every American interprets it the same way. And that's precisely what makes the story interesting. The British tourists arrived expecting to see an unusual amount of patriotism. Instead, they discovered something more complicated. they discovered that the same flag can mean different things to different people. For one person, it's freedom. For another, family. For another, military sacrifice. For another, national pride. And for someone else, perhaps simply a familiar symbol outside their front door. And then there's the comedy of the whole thing. One British tourist basically summed up the American experience by looking at the giant flagpole and realizing, mate, that's not a flagpole, that's infrastructure. And perhaps that's the real culture shock. The British tourists came wondering why Americans seemed to fly the flag everywhere, but after seeing the neighborhoods, the giant flags, the celebrations and the people behind them, the question started changing. It wasn't, why are Americans obsessed with their flag? It became, what do Americans see when they look at it? And in America's 250th year, the answer seems surprisingly simple. For millions of Americans, they don't just see a flag, they see freedom, memories, sacrifice, family, community, and home. And that's when the British tourists finally understand. Now we get it.